Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the American Antiquarian Society's program, Weekly at 250. Black Women Poets Reimagine the Verse of Phillis Wheatley Peters. This program is part of our series, Artists in the Archive, and you can find more in that series on our website. We welcome everyone here in person, also all of you attending virtually on YouTube as we live stream this program. We are coming to you from the ancestral homelands of the Nipmuc tribal community, who remains an active presence here in central Massachusetts. My name is Debbie Hall. I'm the CEO of YWCA Central Massachusetts, the founder of Worcester Black History Project, and member of the American Antiquarian Society's Council. Our mission as a national research library is to cultivate deeper understanding of the American past, grounded in our growing collection of primary sources since 1812. We foster a broad community of inquiry through inclusive programs and generous support of scholarship. As a nonprofit organization, we welcome any support you can provide to help with our programming. Thank you. You can learn more about the AAS at our collections and programs on our website at americanantiquarian.org. Tonight's program is being recorded, and you can watch recordings of our programs on our YouTube channel. We will have time for your questions later in the program. In addition to welcoming researchers from around the world and from Worcester to use the collections, both physical and digital, we host programs like this one that provide insights into the past and its resonance for today. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. Danielle Legros George is a writer, translator, editor, and author of books of poetry, including The Dear Remote Nearness of You, winner of the New England Poetry Club's Sheila Margaret Moten Book Prize. Her work has been supported by fellowships and grants from numerous institutions, including the American Antiquarian Society, where she held a Hearst Foundation Creative and Performers, Artists, and Writers Fellowship in 2023. A long time. George was appointed the second Poet Laureate of the City of Boston, serving in the role from 2015 to 2019. She is the author of the following books of poetry: Island Heart, The Dear Remote Nearness of You, City of Notions, Letters from Congo, and Maroon. Most recently, she is the editor with Artress Bethany White of Wheatley at 250. Black Women Poets Reimagined the Verse of Phillis Wheatley Peters. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie, for that kind introduction. I would also like to thank Nan Wolverton, Scott Casper, Elizabeth Pope, Lauren Havalis, and everyone here at the American Antiquarian Society for creating the space for this programming. I would also like to acknowledge Greg Harris, who is one of the editors of Pangyros, which is the publisher of Wheatley at 250, a book that I will discuss briefly this evening. And I'm happy to be sharing space with my sister poets in the house. My brief presentation, about 15 minutes, will consist of two parts. First, an introduction to Phillis Wheatley Peters. And some of you may already be familiar with all or portions of her story. And second, I will talk a little bit about how this anthology came to be. So to begin with an introduction to Phillis Wheatley Peters, who, as you know, I'm going to put this bottle down, who, as you know, is the author of the 1773 book, Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral. And she has been called and is many things, including the girl who was kidnapped from her home in West Africa in about 1760-61, and enslaved and ferried to Boston, where she was enslaved by the Wheatley family. And she is also the acclaimed 18th century transcontinental poet. In a really wonderful 2006 essay, the poet June Jordan names Wheatley the first decidedly American poet on this continent, black or white, male or female, by virtue of the keen attention Wheatley pays to the turbulent events of her time and the, quote, revolutionaries who would forge America. And as you know, in 1773, we were yet to be the United States, and Wheatley was witnessing and documenting the events that would help create this nation. Historian Henry Louis Gates Jr. situates Wheatley squarely in the colonial and post-colonial debates that sought to confirm or dismiss Black intelligence. As a consequence of her distinction as a poet, Wheatley was thrust into a cosmopolitan sphere and found herself in conversation with such figures as George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. So here she was, this young woman, a Black teenager, talking to these dudes, right? as the nation was being formed. And she was also in correspondence posthumously with Thomas Jefferson, whose 1785 Notes on the State of Virginia prefers scathing and undeserved criticism. For Jefferson to have recognized Wheatley's talent and intelligence would have been to recognize the talent and the intelligence of all he had enslaved and from whose labor he had benefited greatly. Endorsers of Wheatley's 1773 book identified themselves as among the most respectable characters of Boston. So these are the people who, to use a contemporary a term we use today, blurbed her book, right? And they included the governor and the lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is as if my book, I'm thinking about it in today's terms, as if I had Moore Healy write a blurb for my book, and Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. So of her poems, these most respectable characters in Boston remarked, she's been examined by some of the best judges and is thought qualified to write them. A biographer of Wheatley's today, David Waldstreicher, who was here at the AAS, I believe, notes, Wheatley became fluent and culturally literate and able to write poems in English so quickly that we shouldn't hesitate to call her a genius. Recent scholarly attention to Wheatley's work includes an excellent book by Honoré Fanon Jeffers, who did research here at the AAS for that book. The book is entitled The Age of Phillis. And significantly, Jeffers advances the argument for referring to Wheatley by her married name, Phillis Wheatley Peters. At the time of her death, she was still wedded to John Peters. And this important historical detail liberates Wheatley Peters from perpetual historical adolescence. So we can now separate the celebrated but enslaved teenage poet from the free and married author and grown lady. This is an image we believe to be of Phillis Wheatley. It was published in a 19th century journal in Paris. She is resplendent. I think you will agree. Tara Bynum, a scholar of literary histories, in her 2023 Reading Pleasures, Everyday Black Living in Early America, deepens our understanding of Wheatley's inner life by identifying not her poems, but her letters as a means by which Wheatley, quote, delights in the pleasures of her living in spite of and because of the world at large. And many of you know she had a long epistolary relationship or letter writing relationship with a woman named Obur Tanner who lived in Newport, Rhode Island. Right? And the letters, Bynum notes, contain ordinary glimpses into a friendship between women. Here is one such letter. Let me try to read it from my notes here. Dear Obur, I'll just read portions. I am exceedingly glad to hear from you by Mrs. Tanner and wish you had timely notice of her departure so as to have wrote me. Next to that is the pleasure of hearing that you are well. You will do me a great favor if you will write me be every opportunity. I have but half an hour's notice and must apologize for this hasty scrawl. I am most affectionately, my dear Obur, your sincere friend. So you see this beautiful sweetness between them. And letter writing in that day was not fast. So you couldn't pop off a text because you had to take out your quill, dip it into the ink and upon parchment or paper, and then, of course, it had to dry and so on. Phillis Wheatley Peters called herself an Ethiop, an African, and a poet, and she dubbed herself friend to, among others, Obur Tanner, Scipio Moorhead, a young African-American painter believed to have made the image that appears in the frontispiece of the 1773 book, Samson Okum, a Mohegan Presbyterian evangelist, and Selina Hastings, English Countess of Huntingdon, who was instrumental in funding the publication of the book, the 1773 book in London. So Wheatley Peters saw her verse published in London, in Boston, on two sides of the Atlantic. She named herself wife to John Peters, whom she married in 1778, and mother to their children. She was an acclaimed writer and political actor in her lifetime, but would not live to see herself as inspiration for an immense number of scholarly, literary, and creative texts like the Wheatley 250 text of ours. And she wouldn't see the Boston plaque now in Chinatown, recognizing the site where she was purchased. That's a hard word to say, right? Nor her likeness in the form of a bronze statue on the city's Commonwealth Avenue Mall. She wouldn't see the buildings and lecture halls named for her hundreds of years after her unexpected death in 1784 while she was still in her early 30s. And a second manuscript known to have been circulating at the time of her death has never been recovered, nor has the exact site of her grave in the Copp's Hill burying ground in Boston's North End been identified. And this is an ad in the Evening Post, which I learned of through the great work of Elizabeth Pope, which is here, in the AAS collection, in a newspaper in the AAS collection. And it's just amazing for me to see. She dedicates that second manuscript to Benjamin Franklin, and we see a number of the titles of the poems in that manuscript. The hope is that it might somehow appear someday. We know that she was named after the ship Phillis that bore her to Boston and into the maw of the greed and attempted dehumanization that was the transatlantic slave trade. But we will never, or we don't know yet, her true name, her West African name. We may never know it, the name given to her by her parents. But many of us call her and claim her as a sister, as an ancestor, and the mother of African American literature, and a luminary of United States letters. So I'll speak very briefly about how this anthology. Oh, no, we don't want to go there yet. Surprise! How this anthology emerged. Nina Simone is somehow involved. Back in 2022, I was invited by Bob Allison, who is the president of the Colonial Society of Massachusetts and a noted historian of Boston, to design a Wheatley event for the society that would also be public-facing, as we anticipated the following year, which would mark the 250th anniversary of the publication of the 1773 book, which was last year. And of course, I was excited by the idea of designing such an event. And the first thought, because I was an academic, is an academic panel gathering of scholars, Wheatley scholars, to talk about the import of Wheatley. But then I thought, ta-da! Am I not a poet? And was Phillis Wheatley Peters not a poet? And so I thought, why not gather poets, some of whom are scholars, of course, to talk about the importance of Wheatley to their lives, and why not Black women poets, right? To think about Wheatley, and then the idea transformed itself into why not look at her poems as poets and try to understand what these 18th century poems written in this very sophisticated high English were saying to us. And so I called a bunch of friends who are fine, noted poets, and started talking to them about this idea, and everyone was really excited. So we thought, okay, let's do, in addition to a panel, why don't we do a commemorative, chapbook, right? And a commemorative chapbook went from 10 poems to 20 poems. So essentially, the anthology consists of contributions by 20 noted Black women poets, each of whom was asked to reinterpret, translate, reinscribe a Wheatley poem. Right? So look at the Wheatley poem. So the Wheatley poem exists in the contribution. The new poem exists, and then we asked each person to write a brief commentary on what it was like to engage Wheatley. Right? So each contributor has a 3-segment set, if you will, in the anthology, and as poets and editors, I came up with the idea. I pitched it to Pangyris. Pangyris wrote me back the very same day. Greg Harris, are you in the house? Thank you, Greg, and your colleagues said yes. We want to publish this book, and fortunately, our trust Bethany White, who became my co-editor, was a member of the Pangyris team, and I invited her to join me, and off we went. As poets and editors, we understood the commemorative year as an ideal moment to revisit Wheatley, to get close to her, to approach her work from the shared standpoints and identities of women of color, of Afro-descendants, and practitioners of one of humanity's oldest art forms. We made our call clear that this was an undertaking not of scholarship, but of art making, of interpretation, of creating covers, if you will, in the same way that Nina Simone made Feeling Good by Anthony Newley and Leslie Bricusse inimitably her own, in the same way that, anybody know who this is? Sinead O'Connor blew up a song called Nothing Compares to You. Do you remember that song? Okay, those of us who survived the 80s. But do you know who wrote that song? Prince. There he is. There he is. I thought, how do I include Prince in a quasi-academic PowerPoint presentation for the AAS? And there he is. And so we asked contributors to consider how their choices in language and form might reinvigorate Wheatley's themes and messages. And we were really keen to understand what could be demanded of us to keep appreciating and interpreting Wheatley's work and how to make her text exciting to readers of various ages and experiences and in this moment. So this here again is the cover of the book, and we encourage you after the presentation to avail yourselves of copies of the book, which we are very excited about, which we love. So that's a little bit about Wheatley and a little bit about the book. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Danielle. I have seen it all now. Prince has made an appearance at AAS in election. I love it. I love it. You were going to read a poem, I thought, for me.
If we have time at the end.
We'll have time. Okay, wonderful. So this is a great book. I encourage you all to pick it after the program. And we will have time for questions in a little bit, but we're going to get through the program. So as I introduce some of my favorite poets and Black women poets in Worcester, can you all come up as I do that? I'm going to start with Jolanda Thorpe. She is a spoken word poet from Worcester, Massachusetts. She graduated from Boston University with a degree in biological anthropology in January of 2020. During her time at BU, when she was not examining primate samples, she wrote, you want to sit down first, and then I'm going to call you all up. And then she wrote short stories for sure. I'm sorry. Getting nervous. For Charcoal Magazine, a student-led publication. In 2021, Jolanda's poem was chosen for the African Burial Ground National Monuments Still I Rise tribute to Maya Angelou. Next, Serenity. That was for, okay. I didn't know if you were coming for it. Serenity Jackson, a student at Worcester Technical High School, is the 2024-2025 Youth Poet Laureate for the city of Worcester. She performs original hip-hop rap songs and has presented her work at the Apollo Theater in New York City. Her many awards include Best Hip-Hop Rap for 2 years in a row at Worcester Music Awards. Jackson is passionate about using her music and poetry to spread awareness, kindness, and positivity. And last but certainly not least is Ashley Wonder. She has been writing and performing spoken word for over a decade with dynamic passion all over Massachusetts. She teaches workshops to various age groups, hoping to inspire audiences around her to know that healing and liberation is possible. So, Jolanda, you're on first.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. I was too eager to get to you all. I just want to thank the AAS for inviting me, Deb always for putting on these amazing events, and all of the amazing poets that I got to meet and work with. It really has been mind-blowing. This April, I had the opportunity to view the Giants exhibit, which is Alicia Keys and Swiss Beats exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum. And one of the paintings there was the study of spoken word, which is an image of this woman, and she has her chest up, and she has her chest out and her head up, and she's reading from this poetry book. And on the bottom, there are names like James Baldwin and Gwendolyn Brooks and Phillis Wheatley. And I wanted to start with a poem that was inspired by that painting, because as I was reading her works, so many of the themes felt close to me that her words became my own. So this is my first poem. I study each letter of your works as if they were nucleotides, making up your DNA. Surprise, we're sisters. Same father, different mother. We grow up as friends down the street from each other, sharing notes we pass in class to each other, telling secrets of our romances, sadness, same tragic, but we're there for each other. And one day you'll become my daughter's godmother, and we will raise her together. Long after we pass, will our children ever find the relation from the unpacking of suntanned boxes stored in the attic and realize that my journals are family portraits? My periods, your freckles. I rhyme in your laughter. Reciting our poems back to back is like we're smiling to the camera standing next to each other. So, like I said, I feel like I have lived many of Wheatley Peters' themes. And I had this like visceral, angry reaction to reading on being brought from Africa to America. I felt this anger, but there was also an understanding. Even in my own life, I have felt a need to, in a way, denounce some of my Blackness as a way to show that I am worthy, as you will see in this poem. And I kind of want to dismantle that, so I literally dismantled that by taking the words of that poem and creating a new one. So I will read that one first, and then I'll read the one that I wrote. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God and that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew, some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train." So this is my interpretation, which is called On Being Brought from Africa. "My land taught my soul that there's a God. Redemption knew our race. Remember, Negroes, black, be refined and angelic." As was mentioned earlier, there was discourse about referring to Phillis Wheatley Peters by her married name. And I understand that, but as a woman, I also feel this weird tension that she is either referred to a name given by her enslavers or a name given really by a man, taken from a man's last name. And I kind of wanted to play with that, so I made an acrostic poem. And acrostic poems are where the first letter of each line spells out a word. And it spells out Phillis Wheatley, and then I made a shorter one that just spells out Peters. "Pronunciation of your name, does it bring you home? Or do the syllables crash into each other, lost following maps by the ancestors written in a foreign language? Is your name yours? I'd like to think you stitched this name to the names of women who came before you, familiar hands guiding you back even as land separates body from home. After girl is torn from her identity, your name is a square in a larger family quilt, never losing the connection to each of the women who came before you. Perhaps this is your name, but it is not you entirely. Identity resting on a hyphen which tethers you to a man. Even after death, your agency will be remembered as an extension of his name, your identity shared. And then I have one last poem. And when I was viewing the archives, I saw the announcement of Wheatley Peters' death in the Independent Chronicle and Universal Advertiser. And next to that announcement was an ad for raisins. And I thought that was really funny because when I was really young and I would go to funerals, I thought, oh, their skin kind of looks like raisins. So this is a poem about both. Moon drops swell in sclerae as droopy eyelids eclipse the grapes. The body bathes in water the way fruits bathe in the sun, until skin is hard and shriveled, unrealizing the time that has passed, but instead content with the stillness, surprised how one can still grow even at rest, the way fruits grow in the sun, darker and darker until flesh falls off of meat and returns to the ground. All right, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I decided to write about Phillis Wheatley's perception, how I felt she might feel about herself and her background, rather than focusing on her versus herself. I decided to put myself maybe in her footsteps. My first poem is called A Little About Me, Phillis Wheatley. When you look at me, you may see me as just a black girl, a girl with bruises everywhere, or a girl with emotional and physical scars. But there's more to me than just the memoirs. Mary. Oh, Mary, quite contrary. She was such a good person, for she taught me how to read and write in her own version. She inspired me in so many ways, and it took up so many of our days. Days for her to teach me, days for me to trust her, and I did it. I trusted that what she was teaching me would help me to go more places. I dreamed, oh, so many dreams. Dreams of transpiring and inspiring so many faces. I started reading when I was just 12 years old, writing. And since that day, my life was changed and my stories began to unfold. I took what I learned and made it into something that could help others. Others to be educated about what freedom truly means, about the power of words in Christianity. I would rather sit here for hours and discover and put forth all my powers. I would rather talk about all my encounters, good or bad, before I see another black female go through what I did, or become sad, and allow the sadness to drive her mad. I feel the need to help others, a need I wish to fulfill because I am made of a million colors. I'm also referred to as the African genius, and what I went through has helped to shape who I am. I got my name from the slave boat I arrived on and the family who bought me. My poetry comes from my heart and from what experiences have taught me. I am Phillis Wheatley. My second poem is called Identity. Slave. A name I get called often. People may remember me because I once picked cotton, but that's not who I feel like inside anymore. I don't want to be in a war with the world anymore. A poet, a writer, with a creative mind. I would say I'm one of a kind. But when I say that, the people think it's a bad thing. Like, what kind of problems will I bring? And they question me. How did I make it out free? How did I make it across the sea? What kind of things did you see? Questions I don't want to answer, so just leave it be. How can you put behind you what once occurred when you are not currently being heard? Slavery isn't some kind of joke, so when they ask, do you want to talk about it? Nope. You know it is a sensitive topic, so to bring up the past when you see me moving on is pretty ironic. I'm not a slave. I'm a writer now. I'm finally allowed to speak my peace of mind. I'm no longer locked up in a cage, physically nor mentally, because it's a new age. Mentally torn and abused no more. No more feeling like an animal who can't come out of the barn door. I've decided to change how the world views those like me. I've decided to change how others view my identity. I escaped and learned how to creatively write my mind in hopes the world would forget about the girl I left behind. So, change your mind about me. I'm not just a slave. I am a new person reborn in a new way. My last poem is called From Black to White. From sticks and stones that break my bones, from abuse and neglect, in places that would be known as the project. Harsh memories I can't forget. A time where my knees scraped the ground and my heart uncontrollably starts to pound, like the belts of metal that hit my skin again and again and again. Words that stick to me like gum on a table, my worth becomes purchasable. When he does those things to me, they create an overflowing river in my brain. Sometimes it makes me forget my name whom they never call me, because to them we are all the same. My name is, that doesn't matter anymore. It's coming towards the end of the constant war. that my old family used to do when they slammed me onto the ground and the floor. Because this new family teaches me new things and shows me the good in life, which has helped me spread my wings. It's hard to trust, but to them I'll adjust. A new family, a new house to construct. A time where I must start over and trust they mean good when they take over. A family of a different color, a color that I used to be afraid of, but I'm learning to love with an open mind and an image of the past left behind. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. So what I love most about Phillis Wheatley, I touch it to my family because I have an aunt with the same name, and my family jokes. They used to always call her Wheat. I'm like, where's that come from? I'm like, oh, I never knew. My whole life it's been Phillis Wheatley. So that's there's that. What I loved about reading all the different poems, it was a lot to go through and digest to read everything. It's a time frame of a century where I didn't understand it when I was younger, and all the dashes. I'm like, what's going on? It's a lot to process, but to look at it now as an adult, it's still a little hard to process, but I can appreciate it for what it is. So I kind of took everything. I wrote out specific things that hit me personally, and that's kind of how I molded the poems. So I have three, and the first one is very short. It's called a tanka. So for the poets in the room, it's a 5775 syllable count, and here we go. No ordinary woman found love not rich must be how most poets live extraordinary. And this one I just finished right now, unwritten. Hey. What I loved about reading through all of the amazing work here was that she wrote a lot of funerals. So, yeah, she wrote much of funerals. I find much kindred here, for I played saxophone melodies for comfort more than love. I wonder if her humor was dark as mine, heartbreaking of weeping. It must be a light, this amazing woman to never know. I'm grateful to hold. And this one is a sacred flame. She be the first of us to be legendary, a making of boldness, black beauty. In a time when women and black were bound, seen as less than, where names weren't their own, where they were seen as the lowest form of humanity, slave, suffering, sorrow. She overcame, found language and words to be her deliverance of such evil. She must have had the good white masses to teach her something that was forbidden: knowledge, comprehension, power of education. She be who we all inspire, a household name. Before we knew of Frederick or Sojourner, she was our anchored root. And maybe with the branches of her legacy, they say she was a genius, the kind only a good God can give. A heavy gift that she is held to the highest, a beacon of light, to sow the seeds she left behind. And ain't it a funny thing? How she defied odds stacked against her own soul before maybe she even knew what she was destined for. She be the first of us to be legendary. Before the term GOAT, icon, one of them ones, she was embodiment of scripture. And if her writing is eternal impact, then her dancing was held to her chest in joy to forget servitude. Her soul was birthed a sacred flame to never be ordinary, a genius by every right. Here's the thing of carrying such a gift. The humble in heart rarely are aware. We give it away to inspire the next generations, planting seeds of hope. We give it away. It's not destined for riches of this world. That's why she be the best of us, legendary. The genius that only a good God can give. that comes with a suffering, quenching of fire, only to be risen as a phoenix forever burning. God awakens this kind of flame to be extended. She is our anchored root beyond generations and lifetimes.
Wow. She do be the best of us, Phillis Wheatley. Um, Danielle, are you going to grace us with your poem? We have time, and I would love for the audience to hear it. In the meantime, please think about questions you may have, and we'll take those following Danielle's reading.
So I too responded to On Being Brought from Africa to America. And it's one of Wheatley's more famous poems. And it's one of the poems in which she addresses slavery and racism directly. I think she indicts slaveholders, asking the question asking if Christianity and slavery are compatible. So I'll read the Wheatley poem again, and then I'll read my reinscription. On Being Brought from Africa to America. 'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. And I really appreciated what you did with flipping the idea of blackness as negative in your poem. So I'll read my reinscription. On Being Brought from Africa to America. And Wheatley credits mercy for saving her. So mercy is personified in this poem. It was mercy indeed who carried me from what was deemed my pagan land. Mercy, you showed my soul to me, taught me to understand that God exists, that something greater exists too. Now, mercy, who knew what you and I knew? Some say and see the dark as dead, as colored by a knot and dread. I say, I name us fully, Cain, daughters exiled, sons of rain. In us the flood, the moon and tides, uncut shores and lines, and more horizons, the rays and versed libations to the waiting sun. Thanks.
Wonderful. And can I get another round of applause for all of the poets? Wonderful. And we have a few moments for questions. So do we have any questions from the audience or any from our virtual audience? Any questions for the poets? Yes.
I have a question for Serenity. Thanks for your beautiful poems. How did you arrive at entering Phillis Wheatley Peters? What gave you the nerve, the bravery to say, I can write in her voice?
That's a good question. It came into the creativity of being able to read about facts about her online. Like I was reading about facts about her and thinking about my ancestors of how like I've been educated on Black history, and I know, like, reading on how it feels to be a slave, I was like, she had to have felt what a slave felt like, but she took the opposite route and became a writer. So it kind of made me step into creativity and write as if I was her, even though I have no idea what it would feel like.
Surely you all have questions. Yes.
I don't know if it's a question so much as a comment. My name's Caretha Mitchell. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm just thrilled to be here and glad to experience all of this creativity. I was really struck by the first poet's connection to women who came before and thinking about how Wheatley would be a godmother to children later. And so I guess maybe to form it as a question, I wonder if everyone would talk a little bit about the experience of engaging with Wheatley as an ancestor and the power of thinking about our carrying her lineage through creativity. Because there's something that you all have me thinking about, this Wheatley at 250. You have me thinking about the way that our nation has not changed in ways that it probably could when it engages someone who is not a cisgender straight white man. So there's a continuity of experience for cisgender Black women. So I guess I just am interested in you all talking about the importance, especially in a moment of violence and political division that we're in right now, the power of tapping into Black women as ancestors.
Deconstruct that question. Danielle, I think you want to go first.
First, thank you for that complex question. The continuity of, you mentioned the continuity of engagement and continuity of
the continuity of the violence of racism and sexism together, right? I always tell my students, it's not that I'm a Black woman that's a problem. The problem is that racism and sexism are always doing their work and they hold hands when they meet me.
Yes, yeah. I think that's the very answer to your question. Because there is this continuity of violence, because there is this continuity of racism, of misogynoir, I think I'll speak for myself, I think it's not difficult for me to attempt to enter into the subjectivity of Phillis Wheatley Peters. As a Black woman, I'm subjected to all of the isms that you've mentioned, and certainly not as profoundly, I would argue, or as violently as Wheatley may have encountered them, but subjected to them nonetheless, right? And so I don't think it's an enormous leap for me to try to understand her. Wheatley was an immigrant. I mean, can we use that word? Well, she was forced, right? She came across the waters. I too am an immigrant. And many of us are immigrants or have histories of immigration in our families, right? So can identify with that journey. Can identify with some of us learning English as a second language, right? And so can identify with aspects of her experience and at the same time difficult experiences, and at the same time not be crushed by them, right? Not be utterly devastated by them.
And the fact that she left us a text means that we can connect in the ways that you all have connected. I'm just profoundly touched by that connection, right? That it doesn't have to be bloodline, it doesn't have to be direct, it doesn't have to be the exact same level of violence, but because she left us these texts, we can connect. So I'm just, anyway.
Yeah, just to expand on that, in my first poem, I wanted to use the idea of her being a friend that grew up in the same neighborhood, because I know in my life, I grew up in Dorchester, and there was labor that women in the neighborhood did for other women in the neighborhood, whether it was babysitting, cooking meals, doing hair. There was that labor and there was that maternal instinct that was just natural to Black women that lived in areas of high violence. Um, so I think for me, it was just a natural connection to see Phillis Wheatley as this godmother who I did not believe was related to me, but you know, in the book, he ends up being related. Yeah.
I think that's, that's why we do what we do, right? Like we pick for inspiration from everywhere. So to read all her stuff, we're gonna connect to it because it's all human nature. We all can relate to something. But I feel like as Black women, I'm biracial, so just to see it from, as a Black woman, and it just that's how we keep her legacy alive. By we wedding and we're inspired and we keep it going and we tell other people who don't probably never heard of Phillis Wheatley because you're not from. You learn as you grow, right? In education, if you don't hear it from your teachers, your educators, you're gonna hear it from the poets because that's that's what we do.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought up that word inheritances. My name is Patrice Green. I use she, her pronouns with the casual Caretha Mitchell here. But speaking of inheritances, I think a lot about archives and family archives. You mentioned that you've consulted with them. What has your family's collection, whether you think about it as a formal collection or not, that could be your baby books, photo albums, the VHS, Betamax, whatever you got, anything. What is it that your family has given you? And if you are adopted or if you're undocumented or whatever, what do you want to give your family and how does that connect you to your poetry?
Some deep questions.
I'll answer. Thinking, so like I said, I'm biracial. My dad was white, and just thinking of, I'm his firstborn child as well, so I'm obviously the most like him, personality wise. So I feel like, and carrying that on, my father's no longer here, but like I guess that's how you keep the legacies of your families alive through writing. I'm also a musician, so my dad was a drummer as well. He went to Berklee College of Music, so that's where I get inspiration to play my saxophone and piano and all these other things. So that keeps the legacy of him. Who, if you didn't know who my father was, I'm going to tell you. You're going to hear it in the poems. You're going to hear it everywhere I go because that keeps your family alive on both sides, the black side and the white side. It keeps them through everything.
I would say my family, like, we definitely have baby books and all the baby pictures we have. I'm kind of young, so they had like photos in their phones still. It's always been like so amazing looking back at all the memories, but I like to bully myself and be like, ew, why would you do that? Why would you put me in that? My mom's always like, that's just how we grow up. So I would say bringing that to my children, I know I'm young, but everything I do now, I like to reflect on how would my kids look at like me as a kid. Would I be able to tell them about how I acted in high school for them to be able to like inspire off of me? And I like to save little things for their memory box when they're older. And to put that into my poetry, I like to leave like words of my feelings or what I experience as I go on. And if you all may or may not know, I'm Worcester's Youth Poet Laureate. So I do a bunch of different events and I'm learning a lot about Worcester and other things educational. So as I learn, I like to write about it and I'm keeping it all stored in a book and I hope to be able to teach that to my children when I'm older.
And 100 years from now, a scholar is going to look at your collection and be able to commune with you in the same way that we are communing with Miss Wheatley Peters today. So thank you for doing that labor.
You know, both of my parents are minimalists. They did not collect a lot of stuff. They really didn't take a lot of pictures. But my mom recently has been sharing stories. She's from She was born in Antigua, grew up in St. Croix. So she's been sharing horror stories actually, but that she learned as a child. But it's been such a connection to a place that I haven't been in such a long time. And then I really want to do a family quilt. I want to get into quilting. I want to pass that down. And same, just I have so many journals. I think I'm on like volume 6 now, and I will be passing that down. And that's just like my legacy.
Latrice. I think something that I've learned from my parents is that education can be both formal and informal. And so they were very well educated formally, but also there were ways they passed on knowledge that sort of moved outside of those formal sort of structures and formats. Recipes, for example, and the way a recipe is notated or not. I think of my grandmother in particular. I'd ask her, Grandma, can you give me the recipe for cod cakes? And she'd say, well, do you have cod? She would say, I'd say, do you have cod? I'd say, yes, I have. Okay, then use the cod. Do you have parsley? And I'd say, where is the recipe? I didn't have parsley. Guess what? She would say, well, then try cilantro. Or try this. So there was this real flexible way of making the world that I appreciated learning from my grandmother. And which I think I operate using. Understanding that there are formal structures and how useful they are too, but also understanding that not everything can be written down or written down in particular ways, and to look for the ways things arrive to us or appear in the world that we may be unfamiliar.
Yes. And we can't catalog that as librarians. Like, we can't do that. So when you're passing that down, yes, I'm sorry to take over the conversation.
No, I'm a huge fan of the archives. I just want to
Come to the selection July.
Do we have one more question? We can take one more question if anybody has. Sure.
Do you think that, my name's Julie Gomez, do you think that your experience in this way, adding poetry to this book and really learning more about Phillis Wheatley Peters, do you think that you see her differently now than you did before this?
This is for all of us.
Yes.
We want to take it first? I'll take it first. I don't know if I saw her differently. I don't think that my view of her, the knowledge that I learned through this changed my view of her, but it created layers, and I think it made her a more holistic person.
I didn't know anything about Phillis Wheatley until this project, but I would say I learned a lot. It kind of taught me a lot about others as well, not specifically just her, and I'm glad to now be educated.
I agree with my poetess over here. I learned about it in school, right? So that was always, that's what I loved about English class in high school and middle school and college, where can we just get the Phillis Wheatley art? That's all I wanted to hear about, you know what I mean? But to again relearn it as an adult, it definitely has kindled a whole fire to want to learn more and read more about her, and probably write a dozen more poems just out of just learning what we did for this whole project.
I learned a great deal making this book, a great deal about her, her subjectivity, her interiority, the kinds of decisions that she had to make. For example, when she went over to London in 1773, she could have absconded herself, right? Freed herself, but she chose not to. And so, thinking about why she made the choice to return. She was promised her manumission, her freedom when she returned, but also she had family here. She had a community here. She had a man she would later marry here. She was known here in New England, in Boston. So it must have been a very difficult decision, and we see the decision that she made. So these kinds of questions
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for those wonderful questions. Can we give one more round of applause? And then I'd like to tell you a little bit about a couple of events we have coming up. June 26th, chat with a curator and bind your own booklet. In-person program only. You get a chance to view the collection materials written by children, part of our Voices of Children grant to digitize these materials, and bind your own booklet with the aid of our chief conservator. I may come to that. I better come to that. July 15th, we have the Wiggins Lecture. Joe Rezek will present Haiti's Media Revolution and the Racialization of Print. It got cut off. Is that what it is? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So we look forward, if you are not already subscribed to our newsletter, please do that. Follow us on Facebook. We're not on LinkedIn, are we? Are we on Instagram? Yes, Instagram. I do know that. I should know that. Instagram and Facebook. So like and share all the wonderful programming that we have and learn more about us. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Don't forget there are books in the reading room. So on your way out, buy a book and Danielle will sign it for you. Does that sound good? Yes. All right. Wonderful. Everyone have a good evening.